Few days. LeBron James also joined in responding to Laura Ingraham again. This time, the Fox News host backed up Drew Brees' comments on the flag, saying, quote, he's allowed to have an opinion. This before Brees apologized. LeBron took exception to that, though, comparing those comments to 2018 when Ingraham told LeBron to, quote, shut up and dribble. Here's what LeBron had to say yesterday on Twitter, quote, if you still haven't figured out why the protesting is going on, why we are acting as we are, is because we are simply tired of this treatment right here. Can we break it down for you any simpler than this right here? And to my people, don't worry, I won't stop until I see change. Those words from LeBron James. Stephen A., what's the importance of LeBron reacting and speaking out on social issues?
Well, I think it's incredibly pivotal, particularly in this day and age, for obvious reasons. But the first thing I'd like to do is address what he had to say about Laura Ingraham. I think he was right on point, and I thought her response was weak. And here's why I say that. And I usually don't call anybody out, but in the media, but in this particular case, I think it's justifiable only in terms of her response. Not trying to get involved in the minutia. All I'm saying is that she's a pundit on the air on Fox News every weeknight. Your answer to what LeBron has to say or what Drew Brees had to say is, what is it? He's allowed to have his view about what kneeling and the flag means to him? I mean, he's a person? What are you talking about? We all know that. Why don't you just tell us the sky is blue? You literally, meaning her, dissect what people say and what it means to you every day. But in this particular instance, when it came to Drew Brees, and in particular what LeBron had to say, there's no response directly addressing what Drew Brees said, how it affects the disenfranchised community in this nation, and the uproar that has emanated from it. I thought that was a relatively weak response on her part. Now, getting to LeBron James, it's incredibly important. He's intelligent. He's accomplished, and more importantly, he's powerful. You're not going to squash LeBron James and just render him muted and meaningless. You're not going to do that to him. He's worth about $1 billion. He's the greatest player in the world at this particular moment in time. At age 35, in his 17th year in the league, he was still a top 2 leading candidate for league MVP honors, and his philanthropy off the court is just phenomenal in terms of the school that he's built in hometown of Akron, Ohio, the issues that he's willing to tackle, his business acumen, what he has accomplished, and more importantly, the class that he has shown throughout his illustrious 17-year career. I will repeat for everybody that wants to listen to this. LeBron James was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at the age of 17 as the chosen one. An iconic athlete, incredibly well known, in the age of the advent of social media and beyond, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all of this other stuff. The only thing you can point to that LeBron James has definitively done wrong in his entire professional career is airing the decision when he had announced he was leaving Cleveland the first time to go to Miami. And there was nothing. We have not even heard so much of LeBron James getting a speeding ticket in 17 years. Has never been in a police blotter, has never conducted himself with anything but the highest level of class. He has been the embodiment of everything we have fantasized about as black individuals in this nation in terms of being a role model. Now, I might have some issues with him in terms of free throw shooting and his sensitivity to criticism on the basketball court, but my God, am I proud of the brother that he is, uplifting brothers along the way, the Rich Pauls, the Maverick Carters, Randy Mims, and all of these guys. As great and as phenomenal as they are, we all know that the likelihood of them being as significant as they are would not exist if it wasn't for LeBron James using his cachet to uplift those around him and beyond. This dude is something special. And the Laura Ingrahams of the world and others have nowhere to go when he addresses them other than to address his point. If you're not addressing his point, you can't touch him because he's giving you no means nor any license to pull that off. That is the point that needs to be made about this here.
It's a minor point, but I would also argue him staying out of the way during the issue about China, a repressive government, and because he has a lot of business there pretty clearly, after Daryl Morey made that tweet. I would say, given how he's taken social justice stances elsewhere, I would also say that's a misstep. But I get the point, Stephen A. Look, LeBron is exactly right to point out Laura Ingram's hypocrisy, because that's what it was. When it was LeBron and KD, it was shut up and dribble. When it's Drew Brees, it's he's entitled to have his opinion. But I don't think it's primarily racial. I think it's primarily political. I think if LeBron James was espousing the kind of views that Laura Ingraham has and Drew Brees the opposite, then she would have said the opposite. However, LeBron is right in the larger sense in that there's a huge overlap with the racial and the political. A little history lesson. In the 1960s, Stephen A., Barry Goldwater and Richard Nixon developed what's come to be known as the Southern strategy, which is, when you hear people talk about, well, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, because the parties essentially switched character. The Democratic Party was once a states' rights party and largely racist. And in order to get an electoral advantage, the Republicans in the 60s realized they needed Southern conservatives who had identified themselves as Democrats, and so they appealed to racism, to their racism. And the parties largely kind of switched. Now you had one party who was more talking about states' rights and appealing to racists on the other side and trying to create a big tent called the Southern strategy. So as a result, since then, there's an enormous overlap with your political preferences. Usually, it doesn't go for everybody, but there is a big overlap between your political preferences and maybe your views on race. And so it could be more, at least there's a different kind of correlation, let's say. And so what LeBron, and I think a lot of people intuitively understand this. So it's not that I think Laura Ingraham here is motivated by a racial distinction that she notices. I believe that she's motivated by a political distinction. Drew Brees is saying something that I agree with, LeBron isn't, so this one should shut up and dribble, and that one has a right to talk. But there's a huge racial overlap, which LeBron notices.
Well, first of all, I'm going to coincide with you. I'm going to agree with you totally when you say it was more political than racial. I certainly wasn't trying to imply that it was racial in terms of her explanation for Drew Brees. Although one could deduce it from that, because Drew Brees is white and you couldn't call him out, but you called out LeBron James previously for basically doing the same thing. But again, I would side with you there that it's political more so than racial. The other thing is, I would ask you to be very, very careful. I mean, as a black man, I understand who the Southern Dixiecrats were. I understand who the Democratic Party was before I was born, based on what I read. And I'm not going to sit up there and contribute, their racist tendencies and their willingness to block civil rights acts, to block the Voting Rights Act and what have you. I'm not going to surmise and assume that was because of conservatism or Republicans. If the Democrats, that's what they were called, and that's what they were doing back then, that's who the hell they were. Let's not blame Republicans, conservatives, or anybody else for who they were. That's who the hell they were. But that's something, again, beyond my pale and beyond this that I'm not going to get into. In the end, what it comes down to is this. LeBron James sits around and speaks his mind with intellect. He's studied, he's learned, he's accomplished, he's elite at a multitude of levels. And clearly, Laura Ingraham seems to have a problem with that. Because for some reason, when you come to the aid and support of Drew Brees, but you condemn LeBron James for doing the same thing previously, then guess what? That's what we're going to deduce from such actions. There are a lot of people. I'm not castigating her. Be honest. I don't know her. I don't watch her like that. I'm not trying to get too deep into it. I'm talking about for this particular instance, as it pertains solely to Drew Brees versus LeBron James. She is wrong. She is flagrantly wrong, and her arguments were weak because she didn't get into it the way I've been told she's usually willing to get into something. That's a problem, because there's a lot of people who share her political beliefs who would be far more in-depth if they had a criticism of LeBron James or any position that he took compared to what she has expressed.
Well, what I would say is that what happened here is Laura Ingraham was, I won't say she's a hypocrite, but I will say she is hypocritical, at least in this instance, and LeBron James caught her in her hypocrisy. But I think that was politically motivated, at least politically ideologically motivated, and not racially motivated, but that there is a huge overlap and a huge correlation between their two major political ideologies right now in terms of political parties. There's a huge overlap with or correlation with certain political parties and certain socio-political ideologies, which include race, and LeBron noticed it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm with you.
Well, guys, since we both agree, let's move on. We've got much more coming your way on First Take. We're going to continue to talk about the NFL and how players may react next season. The guys dive